Broadcasting live from the Business RadioX studio, it's time for Family Business Radio. Showcasing outstanding family businesses and the advisors who assist them.
Good afternoon. You're listening to Family Business Radio. I am your host, Anthony Chen. We are kicking off the first episode of the year in 2023. We have two amazing guests with us. We have Rachel Donnelly with Black Dress Consultants and Derek Chard with Payroc. So kind of kicking us off, our first guest, Rachel, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me so much.
Hey, thank you for coming. So share with our audience your origin story as to what got you to creating your own business, Black Dress Consultants, and why that particular name?
Yeah, great question. So I created a business that I felt was really lacking and was not available to me when I needed something and needed very specific services. After losing loved ones, I had many experiences with loss in my life, losing both of my parents, and which led me to have to take care of my uncle who was in late stages of Parkinson's, and managing all of those logistics was very overwhelming and complicated. And I felt that, like I said, there was missing piece of strategic support to help families manage the unavoidable logistics of after loss. I like to say that we help the living deal with dying. So I created a strategic project management business to help families manage the unavoidable logistics and administrative tasks of after loss. The name of my business is a nod to my mother, who was an expert in Victorian mourning. And this is a nod to just celebrate that and to just add a little bit of a tongue-to-cheek nod to that practice of mourning. Tongue and cheek, not tongue to cheek, tongue and cheek.
There we go. So what's the kind of the motive? You mentioned you shared with us kind of your experience with loss and realizing that there's really not many of the services available out there. Mm-hmm. Can you kind of share with the audience, those who have not experienced, what you might be referencing to?
Yeah. So there are varying estimates from experts that show that it takes between 420 to 570 hours of effort on average by an executor to manage the logistics and settle a loved one's estate. And that amount of work is left to either an executor, surviving loved one, family member, widow, widower, to manage all of those logistics. And while, yes, you may have the estate or probate attorney, the financial advisor, the accountant, there's a lot of work that's left to that other person who may not have the expertise or may not have the time while they're managing their lives and their children or what have you to manage all of that. And especially if you're trying to do this from afar and you live in a different state where you need to manage those logistics, it can be very challenging. So I wanted to create a very strategic service to fill in that gap that I felt was really lacking in the market and serve as a sort of air traffic control and bringing in all of those pieces and helping to vet other vendors and professionals and just like I said, fill in the gaps.
So for those who are kind of listening in for the first time and they might see down the line where they may have to step in eventually as the executor or executrix, what is kind of the top three things you find by the time someone comes to you, the problems that they're just kind of running into a wall on?
Yeah. So most people are very, we all share some discomfort in speaking about our own mortality. And then we also share that and speaking about it with our aging parents, with anybody else. And so we avoid that at all cost. And the problems with that is not knowing what mechanisms, what estate planning provisions have been done ahead of time, and then where everything is. So your loved one may have a will. They may have, beneficiaries on their accounts. They may have prepaid for a funeral, and you don't know about all of those pieces. So one of the aspects in helping families is to help get them organized and really audit everything. And so if you can look at that through that lens of where are the important estate planning documents that your loved one may have, where are they located? Can I combine them in some sort of central repository, where that's a folder or an online vault? And then what are the missing pieces? And do we need to bring in other professionals to help fill in any of those gaps? Another big aspect to it is you can't just sit around and wait for the mail to administer someone's estate. It used to be you could just refer to that old, metal file cabinet and pull out all the folders and administer all of your loved one's accounts. But our lives are in the cloud. They're on devices. We access paying for different services, investment accounts, retirement funds. They're all online. So that can lead to a lot of missing pieces for executors and family members to know which accounts, which assets, which debts to close, transfer and archive.
So you mentioned a little bit about the knowledge gap for the executor or executrix that is just kind of stepping in and just, for lack of a better term, being bombarded like a fire hydrant of information and things they need to do right away. You mentioned one of them is understanding where's their assets, how is it titled, and I like how you mentioned in terms of social media or just how everything now is on the cloud.
Yeah,
how does that get managed now?
Yeah, so that can be difficult, and that's one of the areas that we really help clients with is doing that discovery of both their assets, whether they are tangible or, property, or if they're intangible, such as their airline points or their Amazon credits or what have you. So really trying to look at things from taking a step back and doing an inventory and saying, okay, where is everything? And then what is any proper sequence or protocol that we need to take to try and have those assets handed over or delivered to the heirs or beneficiaries. So there are many different steps that you can take, to do that. And that's something that we do very strategically with families.
Now, for your services, it sounds like it would be someone coming to you after the fact. Would there be value for those who are just in the midst of their estate planning journey to have you also along with that conversation?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I like to say that we either prevent dumpster fires or we manage dumpster fires. And one aspect of that is that many clients, we help them with legacy planning. And that is a very comprehensive bird's eye view of taking a step back and looking, like I said, doing that audit of what are the pieces of your estate planning puzzle that are there? How old are they? Do you have a will that's 25 years old that was done in Delaware and may not best serve you if you live in a different state? How old is your financial power of attorney? And then where is everything located and how can we pull that together? And are there any beneficiaries that need to be updated? Do you have an ex-husband that still is the beneficiary of your life insurance policy? Can we utilize tools to make plans for your Facebook account or your Apple account or your Gmail, your email account? So there are a lot of measures in place to help, make sure everything's organized and buttoned up. But about 35% of our clients are in that legacy planning space. So we can help come in and say, you know what, that's going to cause a problem. Let's fix that now.
Well, that's good. And I like how you mentioned or used the phrase of preventing dumpster fires. So what is kind of one most common dumpster fire that you get brought in front of you, that's something that just a slight change would have completely mitigated that?
Oh, goodness. Well, I mean, just this morning I had a potential client call from a new widow. She's a young widow. Her husband had been sick and passed away suddenly, but it was expected. And he had a life insurance policy that she was not the beneficiary, which was so sad and shocking to me. But many people don't think through those little bits and pieces. And so now she's looking at possibly having to, to probate his estate to get access or to have these funds transferred to her, because right now they're payable to the estate. And it's going to cost her probably a lot of money, maybe half of the proceeds, because it was a smaller policy, to have that designated to her. And it's just heartbreaking. That is a very quick fix that you can usually log into a platform and make so easily. So there are things like that that just break my heart, but can be so preventable and prevent a dumpster fire like this, and just allow for ease instead of anguish down the road.
And that definitely trips me up, because for my listeners, being in the financial field, that's the first go-to in terms of reviewing something very simple.
100%. 100%. Because most people think, I have a will. And in this case, their loved one didn't have a will, or her husband didn't. But a lot of times it's not just about having a will. It's about having a strategy. And are those assets following the strategy? And many assets, as you know, Anthony, can fall outside of probate. So there are things that you can do very easily for free, where you can log on or just make a phone call to make sure that beneficiaries are up to date and are who they want you to be to.
Particularly on the mixed relationship or second or third marriages.
Yeah.
I mean, if you were paid a nickel for every time you ran into a policy that needed updating, would you be retired?
Yes, I would. I would. Yeah. I can't tell you how many times I've seen where an ex-husband or someone that it was outdated, the beneficiary, and they didn't mean to do that. So I've seen that a lot. Another big trip up is just people fighting over property. And I'm not talking about a palatial estate in New York City. I'm talking about, grandma's pie plate and some things that really people get upset about that have that sentimental value, and not necessarily financial or tangible value. So making plans to say, you know what, Anthony, you're going to get grandma's pie plate after I'm gone. Go ahead and write that down. Can lessen a lot of heartache and fights among siblings.
It sounds like you're also being brought in. Are you ever brought in as kind of a mediator among these siblings, or just?
No. I really try to leave that to the professionals there and help fulfill either the wishes or the guidance of an attorney or other professionals. So really try to follow that. I try to stay in my sandbox as much as possible.
And then prevent them from having to make that debate and just have it all.
Correct. Yes. And then on the other side, are there things that you do not want? Many children of our age who are children of boomer parents are being left with silver, china, crystal, Hummel figurines that they do not want. So making plans ahead of time so that there isn't the guilt of throwing that in the trash or giving it to the Salvation Army can go a long way.
So you're telling me kids don't want all the silver and the china and all the other knickknacks in the attic, in the basement? What is this?
I know it's crazy talk, but they don't. I read a lot of articles that are referring to it as the great junk transfer. As the boomers are aging and passing away, they're leaving just so much stuff for their adult children and grandchildren to have to deal with that they do not want. the big brown furniture is a big one. Nobody wants that giant china cabinet or a buffet that was hand carved in 1928. So
that's a very specific. I'm assuming there's a story.
Yeah, I have a buffet in my dining room that was hand carved in 1928. That's taking up a lot of room. So yes, practicing what I preach, but the guilt.
Mm-hmm. And then speaking from shifting from guilt now to a little bit on the more proactive side, the legacy conversation. Mm-hmm. What is kind of the most common theme that you run into that is of a primary concern for those who are actually taking that step? I mean, it's already one big leap for them to actually have that estate planning conversation, mm-hmm. but to take the extra step of outlining what they want their legacy to be. Yeah.
And that's, that is a part that we tackle together is what are there ways that we can document or safeguard, preserve what was the essence of you? Mm-hmm. What are any family stories, any important family recipes that you want to make sure are handed down? That can be, and I use this word on purpose, a big casualty of losing a loved one is not knowing where that roll recipe that you make every Thanksgiving came from, or why you celebrate a holiday a certain way. And just those traditions, those things that are the essence of your family, those traditions, then can get lost very easily. And it's just, I think that can be the fun part mm-hmm. of legacy planning is saying, what do I want to make sure is safeguarded and preserved for generations to come.
Definitely partner with the kind of the traditions, and you mentioned secret recipes. Going to grandparents' place, grandma's got either got the roll or the pie, and it's just not the same buying it anywhere else.
Yeah,
and you brought up that, unfortunately, sometimes being a casual, because I'll pass it down to you. Pass it down. Well, grandma,
let's do it now. Yeah. Let's do it. Yeah, I mean, I've started making my grandmother's roll recipe with my daughter this Thanksgiving to make sure she knows where that came from, and we do it every Thanksgiving. And it's just something that's fun and cool to pass down. But, I miss that not having my parents around of saying, how are we related to that cousin or that aunt, and what side were they on? And so just being very proactive and intentional about saving some of those things. And those questions can lead to bigger questions. Now that you talked about great Aunt Etna and how we're related to her, how did she pass away? And do you know if she had a will or what have you in place? And then I'd love to talk to you about that at the same time. Some of those really fun legacy conversations can lead to the more unfun stuff of the estate planning, which adult children can be very uncomfortable having. They think they're trying to get into mom and dad's pockets. And, but go ahead and do it now while you're able and willing and, can have those conversations.
When I'm kind of bringing that up, kind of the elephant in the room is how would then the adult children have that conversation? Because they don't want to come across as going after the parents' pockets, but at the same time, they don't want to inherit the mess.
Yeah.
They have no idea what's behind door number 3.
Yeah. And I say a lot of times, if you want to use me as your scapegoat and say, hey, a friend of mine, Rachel, she lost both of her parents. She had 2 small children, at the time, had to take over caring for an aging loved one, and it was a mess. And that makes me worried. And I'd love to have some conversations to make sure that you're taken care of, that we'll be able to advocate on your behalf, and that we're going to fulfill the wishes that you want and the things that are important to you. I'm doing this out of worry and concern. I just want to make sure that everything's buttoned up as much as possible. So I'm like, if you want to throw me under the bus and use me as your scapegoat, do that. Or if you have another story that has caused you concern, or a friend who's lost a husband at a young age, or what have you, just bring it up as a concern angle of, I want to make sure everything is going to be okay as much as possible.
And kind of share what's out of all the clients and families you've been working with. I mean, what is, I guess, the most unique or memorable experience you've had working with them?
Oh, gracious. So many stories. There have been, I want to also say, I add a little bit of humor to this, but I want to say it's an honor to help families, through these times, and to help add in the lens of my experience, to help, other families. But I'd say a real, memorable experience was, this past year I was working with a family whose the stepson is the executor of the estate. His stepfather passed away. He doesn't live close by, and he has had another family member has tried to have him removed as the executor. For really no reason. We won't get into it, but it's really been heartbreaking at how easily things can go awry without proper planning. And if he had just known exactly where the original version of the will was, a lot of this stuff could have been prevented, and had some more proactive conversations, because there have sort of been, it's been a domino effect of problems and issues, not only having to go to court, but the property inside the house, the actual house that's now part of the estate. It's just caused a lot of heartbreak, and it's been very expensive. Mm-hmm. So like I said, you can't prevent crazy or family members that may have some bad intentions, but if you have your ducks in a row and really understand their wishes, their intentions, and what you're going to fulfill for them, you can hopefully prevent a lot of anguish.
Well, now that this particular client that you're working with kind of undergoing this entire experience, I'm assuming, maybe I'm just putting the cart before the horse here, is that now they're more open in terms of having their own planning and conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And with this client in particular, his mother is still living. And I said, I want to make sure that you're getting her ducks in a row in terms of her will, her financial power of attorney, her advanced healthcare directives, to make sure nothing else may happen that you didn't intend to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So on the subject now, kind of shifting gears from just preventing dumpster fires, but more on kind of creating or leaving good memories or creating that legacy. What is kind of one of the most interesting, I guess, legacy requests that you've had from a client?
Oh my goodness. The most interesting legacy, request. Well, I was working with a client, and she is my age, probably a little bit younger. She's in her 40s, and she wanted to go ahead and plan her celebration of life in the Caribbean. Oh. She wants to make sure she doesn't want anybody to be sad. She doesn't want anybody to be crying. She wants everybody to show up at this Caribbean island with a drink in hand, with an umbrella in it. She wants everybody to come in color and have a big buffet, an 80s music dance party. And she is very intent that she does not want any sadness or crying. She wants this to really be a celebration of her. Mm-hmm. So I like to say the sky is the limit in terms of what you want the celebration of you to be like. Do you want a craft tequila tasting in Cabo? Oh. Do you want your ashes blown out of a cannon or to become a star? There are so many ways that your family can remember you and honor you that are uniquely you. Mm-hmm.
Now you're getting my imaginations going. Because
you could even become a diamond. Yes, we could have your ashes compressed down to be a diamond. Like I said, you can become part of a coral reef if you want to get cremated. You can become part of a forest. So many different options. It doesn't have to be sad and boring and old school. We can really, like I said, put the fun in funeral.
But the 80s music and the tequila, I mean, that's going to be hard to top. Is there a specific memory or experience she had or he had at the Caribbean?
No, she was just very she had a laser focused vision of
very
what
specific
I know. It was
request.
very, very focused, and she doesn't want any, Bible verses, or she doesn't want any of that. She wants everybody to get up and basically roast her, have like a big roasting session and just laughter through tears, maybe. But yeah, she's got a vision. She's got her eye on the prize.
All right.
She may even prepay for it. We're talking through how we could possibly.
Wow.
I'm like, I'm hoping you got miles to ride on this. So yeah.
Don't cash this check too quickly. But
Exactly.
I'm assuming based on her personality here, that all of her friends know this is like coming.
Yeah, I think so. I think that they would be like, oh, that is so uniquely her. Yeah. Maybe we can get a good credit card processing fee to prepay for this.
Maybe. A really good segue. Well, then for our listeners who are just like going from kind of the morbid into, whoa, that sounds like fun, having people party and drink on my name, on my behalf. How can they best find you to get that fun going?
Absolutely. If you're ready to put the fun in funeral, I'm kidding. But if you're ready to reach out to me, I offer a free 30-minute consultation. You can reach out to me at blackdressconsultants.com. I'm on LinkedIn, Rachel Donnelly, or Black Dress Consultants. You can also find me on Instagram at Black Dress Consultants. So look forward to speaking with any of your listeners.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. And now next we have Derek Chard with Payroc. Welcome to the show, Derek.
Hi, how are you?
Doing good. Share with us, our audience, as to what got Derek into merchant services.
Well, first I want to say I'm thinking about my funeral now.
And how you're going to prepay that and party?
Yeah, and then the issues that my family might have with what I want to do versus what they would like.
Oh, okay.
So Payroc, well, I think just how I got started running a business would just go back to my family roots. I grew up around business owners. So Dad and Grandpa ran a business. Uncles ran a business. Mom didn't. She was trying to steer me away from that. But just seeing the pride that they had in their business, being able to help people. But then I think how I got into serving business owners in my business came from also watching them run a business and all the challenges that go into it. I grew up around a HVAC company. So you know how to fix someone's air conditioning, but then you don't see behind the scenes payroll, payment processing, legality, like just all the things that go into running a business and finding people you can trust to help you with those things. So I think I saw that and it got me into what I do now, which is working with business owners and helping them with their credit card processing, with their payment processing. But I think that was the start, just not only growing up with business owners, but then watching them run a business and the struggle it can be sometimes to make it happen all at once.
Well, you mentioned being an observer of all the challenges a business owner face. What got you to narrow down specifically for credit card processing?
Really just kind of randomly, to be honest with you. I wish there was some, great story behind it, but a friend of mine was friends with someone who was selling a company to the company I work for now and just said, hey, you're really good with numbers and I know you like working with business owners and, take a look into this industry. I think you might be good at it. And I think, you can help business owners consistently, right? Become clients and over time. So it was really just happenstance. I can't say that there was a passion for credit card processing that I had. So
as you're kind of navigating now, becoming an expert, one would say, in terms of credit card or trying to be an expert in that regard, like what are the big concerns for local businesses that they might not know about when having a credit processor? Because I'm just looking in terms of as a consumer, just walking up and just kind of either what do they call it, the pin or just not just sliding the card in, but tapping it. For a business owner, how would they be able to tell a difference? And what makes it your special or your field unique to every other merchant processors out there?
It's tough. There are a lot more intricacies to the industry than people think. And even that I thought when I got into it not too long ago. So it's just wild. All the people involved, from the credit card network, Visa, MasterCard, like what they're paying with, the type of business you run, how you're taking the payment, the card that the person's paying with, how much rewards are on it, that have to be paid by somebody. So I think just navigating the expense of digital payment and credit card for especially small business owners when they have to take credit card nowadays. I mean, it's really hard to say, oh, cash only nowadays, much, much harder. And then how you present those options to your customers, whether it's technology and online and just different ways. So there's just a lot of intricacies that I'd say most business owners don't fully know about, and it's hard to explain it all to them because it changes on a yearly basis. It really does, and on a per transaction basis sometimes. So it can be very confusing, but I think that's the fun part about me trying to explain it to them and help them and say, well, no, you thought this was happening, but this is really happening. And they're like, really? Yeah, let's move you here and let's do this. And this is why it'll help you.
So then kind of heading that particular subject and is what is kind of the common misconceptions you find business owners think is happening, but then you run through the numbers with them like, that's not the case.
The biggest misconception is anytime a credit card is used for a purchase, there's two people who are charging fees, two organizations. There's the credit card brands. There's Visa, MasterCard, whichever one is being used, right? And then there's the processor, who in my opinion is actually doing the work. We're getting the money safely to where it needs to go and protecting you. But the misconception is that, oh, well, I am paying high fees, but it's because it's an Amex, which can be true at some times. But as getting into this industry, I've found people who are not as trustworthy in my industry hide their fees and say it's those, right? So I can't get away from Visa's fee. So that it's easy for people to say, oh, well, we can't do anything about that. That's Visa's fee. That's not coming from us. But when you take a deep dive, you realize that's not necessarily the case. And I think that's the biggest surprise that I've seen people have. It's like, well, wait a minute. I thought they say Amex is just so much more expensive. Well, not so much anymore. Everybody's offering rewards and stuff, where Amex just used to. So I'd say that's the biggest misconception and that I find probably. Yeah.
And speaking of the rewards, I know numbers of financials that the money's got to come from somewhere. Now, for listeners who might be thinking, "Oh yeah, I get X percentage cash back, what have you," someone's paying for it. So, kind of share with the audience as to how that calculates, and may either cost the business owner themselves more, or if there is value in terms of having kind of their own loyalty program as well.
Yeah, I can't. So a lot of that is beyond my comprehension even, but yeah, someone is paying for those rewards, right? And it's coming from the business owners who is accepting that payment. It's obviously also coming from people who have credit card debt and are paying interest on that credit card for that credit card. But yeah, I mean, there are a lot of benefits. I know a lot of businesses are trying to kind of take it into their own hands, hey, offering a cash discount or, their own rewards or points to try to offset some of that, but yeah, it is hard to say where it all completely comes from, because that's something that the credit card brands kind of really dictate. And I think that's the most annoying thing for not only businesses and even in my industry is they dictate that. There's really nothing we can do about it. They can come out with a card that's 10% cash back to their person holding it, and a small business owner goes to take it, and the fee is going to be astronomical. But what choice do they have to, to take that?
Then as tech kind of advances up, is it always going to, particularly in the payment world, how do you kind of envision it for the next 5 or 10 years for the business? Or is the cost going to stay kind of level, or is it just going to increase because all these cards are just competing and adding more rewards? Or is tech going to catch up to the point where it's going to actually drive costs down and save money for the business owner?
I think it'll be a mixture of both. Since I've been in this industry, crypto's become a thing, paying with crypto. I mean, just some of the wildest things. You're like, wow, we're going to go there. Right. So I think it's going to do a little bit of both. I don't think, with inflation and everything going on, that fees and things are going to go down. Right. It's an industry where that's just going to continue to go up. But I do think with technology, companies will find better ways for companies to offset that and easier ways for them to offset that. I don't know exactly what those solutions will be. I mean, they already exist. There's, even the government now, if you ever, and I guess shamefully, I've paid one semi-recently, a speeding ticket or something. You show up and it's, if you pay cash, it's this price, but if you pay with a card, it's an extra 5% on top. So they're already offsetting it, but that's not even technology, but technology is starting to do things like that automatically. Mm-hmm. There is already technology right now when people are doing business to business transfers that there's level 2, level 3 data that can be captured that makes the transaction a less risky transaction and therefore lowers the rate from the card brand, right? So there's already things that are automatically happening in the background that are helping business owners. I just don't see the fees actually going down. Everything's going up. So,
well, you mentioned a little bit on the keyword risk. So for those who are not in the credit card processing sphere of things, and you would look at risk differently than anyone else, or maybe even an insurance provider, like share with the audience as to what kind of risk someone like you would look into when determining whether or not to accept a potential business.
Yeah, risk really comes down to the risk of chargeback, so to say. That's what our underwriters look at the most. So they look at things like, how are you accepting the payment? Is it in person, right? Are you taking the physical card? Is it going into a machine with the chip and so on? Which also then you go into fraud, right? Because if someone's entering a credit card online, well, who's the cardholder? Is that a stolen credit card? Who actually made that payment? They're also looking at, is it a service? Is it a future service? So for instance, it can be hard to get travel agencies, merchant services account, because you're paying for that trip to Jamaica now, or half of it. And then, a hurricane comes through and it gets canceled, and that person, that they have to return all that money, right? Do they have the capital? Is that money still there that was paid, or was it put into something else running the business? So, really the biggest risk, is the chargeback, is fraud, services that aren't, that people want to hide, right. From, so they're going to call Amex and say, oh, that wasn't me. Mm-hmm. That charge wasn't me. And it was, right. Or it wasn't. But those are the risky things. So it can be industry, how a payment is being taken, and then, basically those two things.
Well, then that kind of leads to another elephant in the room question is, as someone, a business owner is listening and they're only focused on their specific industry. As you're bringing this up, would the kind of clientele or the way they are accepting payments change the fee structure?
Yes. Not from us. It changes it from a Visa, an Amex standpoint, right? So if someone is inserting that chip into a physical machine, it is a lower fee from Amex, let's say, than if it's typed in manually online, or even manually into the machine, right? And so that's why there's the stripe and the chip and the tap, because those things can be identified through the technology of what was being used versus a number just being punched in. And it goes to that risk. So, yes, there are less risky ways that businesses can accept payments that save them money on a daily transactional, basis. So,
so would it be, advisable, quote unquote, advisable, where if they can transfer a good chunk of their online, I would say, input or payment taking to, if at all possible, and do something physical, would that then save them some costs, at least on the Visa or MasterCard side of things?
It would, but it's tough because everything's going the other direction now.
Yeah.
Right. Everybody wants to be able to pay on their phone and online, and people are moving their businesses online. So yes, it would, but it's tough. And that's why I said technology, I'm not sure if it'll hurt or help, because in that instance, technology is going to hurt, how much people are paying, because everything's available online.
So as you're being brought in and the client might be looking, all right, well, I don't know whether or not the fees I'm paying is up to snuff, if I'm overpaying or if I'm just right. What are kind of the quick things that you quickly look for? What would they have to prepare for you to review?
Well, right off the bat, I just look at their overall effective rate, which it's the easiest thing is dividing the fees into the overall volume, right? But that's just to say, okay, that gives me a general, oh, you're in big trouble. I need to help you, or, oh, you might be doing okay. But one thing that my company does is we do a very, very in-depth analysis. So every single fee has to be recorded on a customer's merchant statement that they get every month. And it'll show every Visa, every Amex, every fee from them, every fee from their processor, and if you look at it, and most business owners don't, because as soon as they take a peek, they're like, what is this? It's 12 pages of hieroglyphics, right? But we take that and we analyze it, and we're able to really pull out and separate those fees. Hey, this was from Visa. This is actually from your processor. Hey, these are fixed fees that you maybe didn't know that they were just charging you on a daily basis. I found a client one time that was just getting charged $650 a month for no reason. It was just a fee added in there.
Huh.
Yep.
Well, that's always a lovely surprise. I'm assuming they've moved and went over and say, yeah, I don't need to pay $650 for no reason.
Right. But it was just embedded in their fee structure. They're like, oh, if a business is doing enough volume, they don't really notice. It's, it's looking into that hieroglyphic. So that's what we do. We really break it down. And I really enjoy doing that, because whether that person becomes a client or not, they love seeing that. They either love the confidence of, oh, I'm actually doing okay. Great. Thanks for breaking that down. Or, wow, I'm glad you did that, because I didn't realize what was going on behind the scenes.
And kind of share for our listeners, as they're kind of learning all of this somewhat behind the scenes as to how their machine works. What is the other misconceptions that you find that people think when they think about credit card processing industry itself?
I heard actually from my uncle the other day. He said, yeah, I'm getting charged all this money and you guys do nothing. You're making this money doing absolutely nothing. And I thought it was funny, but I think that goes back to my last misconception that a lot of that money's not going to me or us, right? It's the card brand. So I think, and we are doing the work. I'd say another misconception, which, it's not a misconception. I came into this industry just a couple of years ago, and I've seen a lot of people who use the hieroglyphics to their advantage to confuse their customers. And so I think that can be a misconception about our industry, but there's a lot of people that it's not a misconception about, right? So it was very important to me to say, no, let's get that out of the way, right? So, because the confusion of the fees, and I've been in positions too where I'm like, do I explain this to you as detailed as it needs to be to really tell you, and some people are like, now I'm confused. I'm like, I know, right? I'm trying, but a lot of people in the industry are just like, it is what it is. And I don't like that, but I don't know if that's a misconception, but it's something that I'm trying to battle in my industry and say, no, we can make sense of this. All these numbers, we can make sense of it, and we're going to for you.
Mm-hmm. What is, then to kind of break things that might be very confusing into something that just a bit, that they only have so many bandwidth in their attention in a day. Is there a go-to analogy or metaphor that you kind of lean on when explaining certain things?
There is one that I've used recently, and I compared, I don't know if this is good. No, I compared my industry to the cellular industry, right? I said, there's only so many towers out there, right? Mm-hmm. And then there's so many carriers. And in my industry, that's how it works, kind of, right? There's the people who own the towers. I'm not one of those people, right? And then there's the people who rent the space on the towers. I am one of those people, okay? And then beyond there, you go down to your equipment and your software and your apps in the cellular world, right? So, Verizon has a space on this tower, and you get an iPhone from them, and on that iPhone, you have all these apps. Well, my industry is very similar. So as long as I have space on the tower, you can get whatever iPhone or Android or whatever you want from me, hardware-wise. Mm-hmm. And most of the time, all the apps that are available on all these phones, no matter what carrier you're using, they're available as well, right? So I can do the same. So when it comes to that aspect, that's how I described it. And I think it helped. I got some good feedback. Like, oh, that kind of makes sense. So that's the best I could do there.
So you're kind of the all-around provider and giving them access to the cell towers.
Correct.
At the end of the day.
Correct.
Right?
Yep.
And if I'm following this analogy as well, as the Visas, the Amexes, the Mastercards, they're the towers.
They might be the towers. They might be the air and the land around the towers.
Oh wow! Okay, so they're even bigger. Even bigger. Okay.
Yeah, I mean they're just. I mean they're not even the card issuers, right? The banks are. They're not the processors. They're just the logo, the marketing, the network. So it's kind of interesting, but yeah, I'll have to think more about that analogy then, adding them in.
Well, then good that you mentioned the bank, because for certain business owners, they just kind of default because, I got a corporate business bank account with them. Then they have a lot of their services with the bank. So what is it that makes Payroc different than what a bank channel would come in and offer wise?
Yeah, we are non-bank owned. Most processors are bank owned. And also if you do processing through your bank, which it's the same thing, but kind of inverse relation. But, for instance, let's say you bank with Bank of America, right? Well, I have my merchant processing with Bank of America. You don't. It's with First Data, who is a partner of Bank of America in the background, but it's Bank of America Merchant Services, right? So what happens there is obviously you have to realize that, well, multiple people have to get paid, right? Well, the bank wants some kickback from First Data for saying, hey, any business that comes into our bank is going to go to you. And so there's going to be added fees in there, right? We don't have that. We're not owned by a bank. We don't have to give a portion to a bank, which is nice. We're completely and solely funded and owned. So because of that, we can have our cost floors a little bit lower and be more competitive and help businesses get lower fees. So.
It sounds like you kind of have lower overhead, because I know for a business owner, when you're having someone like you come in and review their statement, and you're coming with something that's drastically lower, they might be scratching their head thinking, how are you coming in so low? Like, what am I losing out here on?
True. Yeah. Yep. That does happen. And I have to explain that, right? Is, well, hey, it might not be this gentleman's fault that was working with you. His cost floor, he might have only been able to go that low. Or else his company won't allow it, because really it's not even a profitable client, right? So it's not that, I don't know what that scenario was for that person, but we can get lower than this. And yeah, so some people are like, well, that doesn't make sense. And then I have to explain just like that. Well, we're non-bank owned. We have leverage, and we also have leverage with all the towers. So that really helps. Unlike a lot of processors, we have access to kind of all the carriers, you could say. So we can go with Verizon or AT&T and all, or all the towers. Some processors don't have access to all the towers. So that helps us out as well.
Well, it's good to know. More like you're kind of a brokerage, independent, where you can just go to any provider.
Correct.
Awesome.
Correct.
Great. Well, then for our listeners who wants to learn a bit more and have you come in and actually review whether or not they're actually paying another $650 just because, how can they best reach out to you?
Yeah, they can find me really anywhere with just my first and last name, whether it's LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Derek Chard. They can email me at derek.chard@payrocsales.com. Payroc does not have a K. It's big things, Payroc. Yeah, we do complimentary free reviews no matter what people want. So if they want to reach out and just second opinion, always here to help in any way possible. So.
Great. Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Now, if you've all heard here, kind of the theme of today's meeting is a little bit about preparation, a little bit about fun, and then also getting into the nitty-gritty details of financials. And this being the first episode in January of 2023, everyone's got a lot of New Year's resolution. So to kind of kick off with the New Year's resolution theme is planning ahead. So the universal question we're going to be bringing out both guests in is, as we're kind of charting for the rest of 2023, I know we're a little early, what would be one advice that you would give to our audience where they're just learning about your services now and they know it's important, but they're so swamped right now? What would be the first step they should take today to make it a little easier for them to actually engage with you or just someone like yourself? So again, the question is, you're listening, just learning about your service now. They're like, oh, I didn't even know this thing existed. I got so many things going on. I got weight loss to lose. I got my kids to get to school, but what's the one little simple thing I could do right now to make it easier for me to either reach out to a Rachel or Derek? Now, this is, of course, giving our great guests some time to think over their answer. This is the legal portion of the site. This show is sponsored and brought to yours truly, Anthony Chen with Lighthouse Financial Network. Securities and advisory services offered through Royal Alliance Associates, Inc., RAA, member FINRA SIPC. RAA is separately owned, and other entities and or marketing names, products, or services referenced here are independent of RAA. The main office address is 575 Broad Hollow Road, Melville, New York, 11747. You can best reach me at my office number at 631-465-9090, extension 5075, or my email, which is just my full name, Anthony Chen, CHEN, at lfnllc.com, or simply also connect with me on LinkedIn. Now I'm going to bring on both guests back into the show. Again, the question was, for our listeners, just learning something new today and realizing how could I
That's
start?
a really loaded question, Anthony. I mean, you're asking us to keep it simple, but yet through the lens of
I know.
Wow, way to do that. But I'm really big into. I'm doing a blog post tomorrow about getting back to the basics.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we get so overwhelmed with what are the right questions I need to call and ask a potential, business if I'm going to engage with them, or I'm not ready to do it, or I've got to do all these other things. I'm like, just pick up the phone and call me, send me a text, follow me on LinkedIn, follow me on socials, and just pop in, send me a DM. Keep it simple. You don't have to do it all right now. Rome wasn't built in a day. Just put one foot in front of the other, reach out. If you do just a little bit of planning, especially through the lens of your business as well, including that in your estate planning, just think through a couple of things. Let's not make it crazy complicated. Keep it simple. Back to the basics.
Well, thank you. Because I know from our listeners coming in, you have the two extreme ends. You have did nothing, dumpster fire, or I don't want to do that. But then you've got your go-to client where she's partying, but they might be thinking, well, I'm not a partier. Does that mean I'm missing out? so they might be a little intimidated.
Yeah, they might be. You know what? And that's the thing. Yes, the world is your oyster, but and through that lens, but you know what? We can always keep it simple. You can also say, I don't care what you do with me after I'm gone. You make the decision. That'll be bueno with me. That sounds awesome. Mm-hmm. And just keep it simple.
Great. Thank you. Eric.
Oh boy, that was my answer as well, but
Sure it was.
So I was trying to even more creative here. So if someone was just listening to everything I just said, pick up the phone, just have a conversation. But even if you don't want to do that, because sometimes that's the hardest thing. Well, if I pick up the phone, we're going to go down the tunnel, and I can't go down that tunnel yet. If it's my industry, take that merchant statement that you have, divide the fees into the volume. And if it's anything over, let's just safely say 3%. If it's over 3%, then you have to call, right? So I think if that's something that, hey, before you reach out, just take that statement, make that division, do that first. Cause if it's below, you're probably okay. They're not getting gouged. And then just, if you ever have a customer that's, well, why can't I pay you this way? Or it's kind of hard to get you to pay your invoice or your bill, or then that might be a cue to give someone like me a call and just have a conversation, like Rachel said. So it's a start.
Yeah. Having that little simple, easy step, or as Rachel mentioned, keep it simple.
I mean, I don't think you're going to do the hard sell. I'm not going to do the hard sell. You're not going to get put into some, email sequence or phone call where we're blowing up your phone. I'm not for everybody. Everybody's not for me, but just pick up the phone. We'll have a conversation. Doesn't work. It doesn't work.
Agree. And sometimes it can be even better. I've had clients that, can you just look at it? And I look at it and I say, you're fine. I could save you $20 a month if you want to go through the hassle. And, well, I don't like this. Can it get any better? Not really. Thanks. And they just feel so much better about their current situation versus, I need to make changes. Something's wrong. No. That is fine. Move on to your next thing on your list. So even just reaching out. And I think both of us are like that. We're going to tell you what you need to do and what maybe you don't. So you feel better, more confident.
Absolutely.
When then building on top of people who might have an okay situation, then kind of bouncing off the question to you, Rachel, is reviewing someone's situation. Have you ever ran into someone where their situation is actually pretty solid?
Yeah, absolutely. That does happen a lot where somebody will call me, and mostly after they've lost a loved one, they just don't even know what they don't know. They don't know where to begin. And they're like, I don't know what I need to be doing. Do I need to be paying taxes? Do I need to be doing this? And we'll go through everything. And I'll say, you know what? You're in pretty good shape. I don't think you really need me. Maybe we could do an hour consultation and that's it. And I could clean up a couple of things for you. I could make an introduction to an attorney, or but you're pretty solid. You're pretty good. And they're like, okay, I didn't know what I didn't know. And I was just so scared I was missing out or not doing something I was supposed to be doing.
Well, you are hearing it here. It's not just reaching out and taking that first step and preventing a disaster or fixing one, but just might be having an even better news. I'm okay. I'm doing pretty good. But rather than having that kind of albatross in the back of someone's head, am I okay or not okay? At least have that kind of sense of safety, that feeling, hey, this is one less stress on the table.
That's why you do checkups at the doctor.
Yeah.
Right? You don't wait to
100%.
Like you're ailing to go to the doctor. You want to do checkups to say, okay, my blood's good. This is good. That's good. My cholesterol. Okay. Then you feel great and you can move forward. So it's kind of the same thing.
But on that lens, it's not a one and done. You got to go back.
Yep.
Same thing with legacy and estate planning. It's a living, breathing plant, like I like to say. You gotta water it every once in a while. So
what you're saying is this third arm I'm growing, I should check out with a doctor. Is that it? I should be waiting.
Yes. Yeah.
And pay with cash.
Pay with cash. Okay, there we go.
Right.
So as we're kind of closing it out here, of course, this being kind of the New Year's episode here, sharing kind of what your intentions are for your New Year. What was your plans? And if you would like to share with our audience as to what is your technique in terms of keeping yourself on the path so that they can also take a little something away.
Am I going to steal yours if I go first?
Probably not. I think you're safe on this one.
One of my intentions, and I'm not a big fan of New Year's resolutions, but I really want to try to do more time blocking in my schedule and like the Pomodoro effect of really setting a timer for 20 minutes and doing something. And just, being more intentional about my schedule because things can go off the rails really fast. I've got not only this business, but another business and 2 kids and it's, a husband and a house and it's a lot of things. So being more intentional about my time is a big, big goal of mine this year.
Great.
I think it's just you're inspiring. So that's why I think you steal them, but you're just like, that's a great idea. But no, I was telling Anthony earlier, me and my girlfriend got a gym membership in November, not in January. So we got ahead of it, but really I would just say that health and I would agree getting more intentional with my time and my business and the people who work with me and my clients and just really making a bigger impact, in those things. But definitely I think, and I know it's cliche, but health is a big thing, for me this year because I've let it get away from me. I didn't do all those checkups that I was just talking.
I
didn't
really
take my own
thought
advice.
you were going to say planning your funeral was on your docket for this year, but I guess not.
I should have, man. I missed that cue. All
right. Well, it was an absolute pleasure. So kind of as we're closing out again, how can our audience best find you?
I'm on all the things. Black Dress Consultants. Just Google me. I'm, LinkedIn, Instagram are the best places to find me.
Social media and by my name, Payroc. I'm an independent sales office of them. So Derek Chard would be what you want to look up. You can find me on any social media.
Great. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And now for a little bit of what we'd like to call Anthony's financial take. As you've kind of heard from our guests, is sometimes a lot of the planning can be quite overwhelming. It's almost like drinking out of a fire hydrant. So kind of going along with the theme of starting out the year with goals or resolution, financial planning can be very complex, but rather than getting stuck in the quandary, or just as we like to call it, paralysis by overanalysis, start something simple. Start with just say a budget, or let's say, for example, if I have XYZ goal, just at least write it down. Make it something solidified as opposed to just being in the air or the cloud. So that when you get to have that conversation, when one's ready for with your financial advisor, hopefully, probably me, then you're going to have at least some kind of starting roadblock to go off, as opposed to just throwing darts into the fog, into the wall. So start something small. Don't get all too crazy. Rome, as Rachel mentioned, wasn't built in a day. So start simple, keep it simple. And with that, we'll close out today's episode. Thank you for listening to Family Business Radio.